Good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It's nice to see everyone out there. I'm Lisa Daziel. I'm Dean of the College of Pharmacy at Southeatstern University. First of all, I'd like to welcome all of you to our United Stand Symposium to learn more about the opioid crisis.
I know that we're all here because we recognize that addressing the opioid epidemic that is ravaging our state and communities is an absolute necessity. The heartbreaking reality is that most of you in this room probably know someone whose life has been shattered or impacted because of an opioid addiction or overdose.
Tonight, it's an honor to be able to take on public health issues as a collective group, and what I've been saying from the start is we need an all-hands-on-deck approach, and we're seeing that right here. It's very important to me to have this discussion because many times we have discussions about policy and health problems that exist in our communities, and the main part that we miss out on is bringing the communities together.
We are investigators and regulators. That's what we do. With that said, we do frequently point physicians and DEA registrants to the prescribing advice that's recommended by the CDC. In regards to coming from an enforcement agency, we hope that physicians and pharmacists and DEA registrants don't just look at us as an enforcement agency. We hope that they look at us as a partner and a resource available to them. Again, we do not want to be in the business of telling a medically trained physician how to treat their patients, but we do want to be a partner and an available resource to them.
My advice is that get involved. If you think you have a part of the solution, I can tell you right now, I'm not a doctor, just like our DEA agent said to me, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a treatment professional. We get a lot of help from Heather and Kathleen and many others in the community that come up and advocate for these things, but it's very important for you all to get out to your legislators and say, these are actual solutions that can help. If you see the budget being crafted and a lot of stuff's being left out that you think is important, you need to speak up, because I've changed my vote, I've changed my position on things just because someone came to me directly.
But legislation is so important, and United Way and all of us at this table and everyone really advocating for some very specific issues that will change what we're doing, and it will change the crisis. We always have to come at this crisis like a multimodal level. You can't just do it from prevention or from legislation. There's multiple ways. So super important is the prescription drug monitoring program. Now, many physicians will report when somebody is being prescribed opiates, but pharmacies are terrific at it. You guys do it, but not everybody does it. If we could get everybody doing that monitoring program, people would know that somebody was drug shopping or somebody was overusing, and we could stop that. It could be transparency. It is really an easy way for us as a community to help monitor this.
There's many states that have implemented medical marijuana have shown a reduction in opioid overdoses and deaths from opioids. I'm wondering, in Florida, what types of discussions are being held around this claim, and are we leaving any room to focus on this industry, the medical marijuana industry, as an alternative, and are we looking at other alternative methods?
Yeah, I think the voters overwhelmingly passed medical marijuana, and in our state, that meant that we as a state have chosen to embrace marijuana for medical reasons and purposes. Several weeks ago, the Florida Medical Association held an opioid summit that was incredibly well attended. In fact, the governor was there, as you know. The Surgeon General Celeste Phillip was there, as well as the president of the Florida Medical Association. And in addition to that, both organizations work diligently in working with the legislators in an effort to try to craft meaningful legislation. And I'll just take one moment, since we heard from legislators. I would like to underscore the fact that there really is no one answer to this.
It was a lot of finger pointing, and we eventually got beyond that to work towards a common process of what the Board of Pharmacy can do. So a piece of that was completely educational driven. So it was educating each other on the challenges that we were having in general, the challenges that we were having with each other, the challenges that, we may have with the DEA, challenges that, there was just interpretation issues between, the prescriber community and the pharmacy community. So I think we took those initiatives, we came up with a better rule, a more usable rule for practitioners, a fairly clear rule. And so I think it was beneficial. I think the continuing education was crucial. And now we sit at the table again, as Scott mentioned, we actually have a multi-board meeting tomorrow. There'll be representatives of more than just the boards I named. Every board from, literally pharmacy, medical boards, chiropractic, dentists, to learn, nursing boards, to learn different best practices from the different communities that are affected by the epidemic. And I think, it's a repeated education of how we can work together.
One of the joys of being a physician is you get to know patients, and so each patient should have somewhat of an individualized treatment plan that involves many aspects of medicine, and some of it may be pharmaceutical, but there are other options. So when someone comes in for pain because they had a recent injury, you take into account what the injury was, what their age is, what's going on, and you have a discussion with them. How is your pain now? Because you would think that someone that comes in with a fracture is in a lot of pain, and anyone that's had a fracture knows it's extremely painful. But you also know that once you set that bone and you're in the right cast or the right brace or you're in crutches, your pain shouldn't be that bad anymore. And really, that pain should be a reminder that you have a problem and you shouldn't put weight on it. And maybe we shouldn't mask your pain with a pain medication. There's other ways to treat acute.
1.4 million Americans will be addicted to opioids, or just this year alone. And the majority of them are in their teens and 20s. This is also the age group that shows very high-risk sexual behavior, which opens them up to infections with HIV, viral hepatitis, STDs, and you add the layer of opioid abuse, and then you have further infections such as wound infections, tuberculosis, things that can go into your heart, cause infective endocarditis, and actually cause deaths. So we know infections can be caused. There are bloodborne pathogens that can be passed along by sharing needles. So the needle exchange program is exactly what it sounds. Provide needles, fresh, sterile needles, so that the users of these drugs will not be sharing needles and consequently passing along pathogens.
Opiates do not represent the bulk of the people prescribed them. So it becomes a very challenging thing for you to craft in a bill that we're only going to target the top 10% of users when they're consuming 70% of the opiates on the market. I get that. But I think it's this broad-based approach. So I do believe that the way to public health, solving a public health issue like this, is going to involve a number of players, because those are the number of players that had a hand in seeing this to where it is today.
Thank you.
One is the addiction a disease? Yes, it is actually a disease. I've been listening to people talking about addiction and being hooked on drugs and so forth and so on. And there is a thing that is called receptors in our bodies. And if you do not have the receptors to the specific drug that you get hooked on and you become addicted to, you are not going to respond to it. For years, we have been conducting research on patients, and I personally had the experience of having a number of patients in a big old tank with cocaine and heroin. We actually provided these drugs freely to both parties as part of the study from the National Institute of Drug Addiction many, many years ago. Patients who actually had the receptors to the heroin, the opiates, went for it. Patients who had receptors to cocaine went for it, and they did not mix it. So it requires a receptor's presence for you to have that. So basically, if you have an epidemic with opiates today, is because somebody prescribed this medication, or somebody got this drug on the streets, or somebody just shared a needle and exchanged drugs, and the particular patient that is becoming addicted and is becoming the focus of attention and treatment had the receptors to respond to the specific drug. That is what makes the basis for this condition to be a disease process. Patients sometimes don't have receptors for a particular drug, but those who do have the receptors actually have a very high potential of becoming addicted, and they cannot stop once they actually start to do it.
It's because of you guys we're able to put events on like this and truly, truly tackle public health issues. So thank you guys for coming to the United Stand Symposium, and have a great night.
Thank you.